So I think that was an excellent start that we had this morning with the first panel. I learned a lot about entrepreneurship that I had not known. I'd seen a lot of Kim's research before, but it was really great to hear the experiences of each one of the panelists and get the story behind the numbers. So we're going to continue in that vein with our second panel, which is going to be focusing on women and leadership in the workplace. And I'm going to hand it back to Katie to introduce everyone.
Okay, well, the only thing I have to say is I would like to introduce the first speaker, which is Ellen Kossek, who's a Purdue professor. So, Ellen, take it away.
So thanks, Jamie, for having me here. And we had a conference at Purdue about a year ago. I was recruited there for an endowed chair and to be part of a women's leadership center founded by the first woman partner at Accenture named Susan Butler. And so I'm so happy here that we're bridging research and practice and policy. And think a lot of Jamie. You're lucky to have her, and Kim, too. So we were wondering about whether to say some of the stats. There's a lot of words here. But basically the data still shows that there's still tremendous gaps. And we thought, well, does everybody know this? And then I had to laugh because Purdue did a article on. I was quoted saying that the U.S. is lagging in the world on policy for gender, and at Purdue alum wrote to the news bureau and said, what are the facts on this? And so I was preparing this talk and I sent these facts back to him yesterday. So there are only 14.6% of CEOs that are women, and women are only 8.1% of top earners in the US and only 4.6% of Fortune CEOs. But if you look at this graphic that was on from Center for American Progress and also NBC News, women are getting about 60% of the college degrees or in the professional degrees, so there's something happening in terms of rising to the top. 16.9% of Fortune 500 board seats are women. In financial services, there are occupational differences that are wide gaps. So financial services, 4.2% of the labor force are women, but they're only 12.4% of the executives and only 18% of boards of directors. In every industry, this pattern is repeated. Physicians, women are most of the workforce, but they aren't similarly represented as med school deans or other, higher level positions. And so we're going to move on, but it's pretty, there's something's happening. We are not moving the needle. And I have to tell you, I was just in Korea and I got to meet with the Minister of Gender Equity, and we don't have like a Minister of Gender Equity or Equality even in the US. We need, I think, in some way to elevate these issues. So I have been working for a long time in gender issues and particularly work family as well. And one of the things I observed is that there are sort of lots of narratives about why women aren't getting ahead. And yet we're kind of siloed. And even I love the panel before, wonderful job. And some of the things that people are talking about were individual factors like self-confidence or having different values that women have. And then at the end, we were talking about organizational and societal issues related to socialization or discrimination. So with a couple of colleagues at Purdue, we just wrote a review that went through 3 narratives on why women aren't getting ahead. And the goal of this is really to say, I hope we can start integrating solutions, because if you focus just on one area, like let's help work family and have more policies, but then if women are the only ones using them to a greater extent, there's stigma and then women don't get ahead. So you have to look across perspectives. So the 3 perspectives are career preference, that maybe women have some differences in values or career preferences, gender bias perspective, and the work family perspective. I'm going to briefly go through all 3 of these. And one of the issues to think about is that when we look at these pushes and pulls and why women aren't getting ahead, it's really their interconnectedness, the lack of integration. What comes first, the discrimination or the socialization or the values? And this is all in a paper that's online in the Journal of Management. And at the end of the paper, we also talk about interventions or what to do for change. But I do think that the fact that our choices that we make as women are shaped by the social context in which we are embedded, is hard to unpack, and we have a lack of clarity, really, on what scholars should study, what practices organizations should implement, and what public policy should be done. And how do we avoid conflicts or unintended consequences of focusing on one area or another? So, like Gary and others have said, always have to have this caveat because we could promote stereotyping in even talking about these perspectives because not all women don't like to be called entrepreneurs, right? There were 10 women in the study that or the talk that Kim mentioned, right? And so we're saying that need to still look at people as individuals, and also the US in particular is a particular culture. There's variation across the world, and different workplaces vary. So we should just look at these trends, but also the goal is to not stereotype as we're looking at them. But the main argument is if we could integrate these perspectives, and I would encourage you in your organizations or just in your own thinking, if you could have someone thinking about, how can we tap into women's career preferences? How can we prevent discrimination? How can we support personal lives so people don't feel they have to trade off their careers at the price of personal well-being? That's it's hard to do, but those three things, I believe, we should not be siloing as much, but putting together. So the first perspective is the career preference perspective. And while I do think Sheryl Sandberg has done a great deal to advance women's issues, I was personally, in reading the book, there were some things that I didn't love about Lean In, and that I felt she talked a lot about individually that women don't lean in. I'm like, well, why aren't they leaning in? Maybe it's because the organization discriminates, or now that she's a single mother, maybe she's written about how has more concerns about work and family issues. So I once again think it's difficult to unpack. But the argument of the career preference perspective is that women are motivated to disproportionately self-select into or out of certain occupations, jobs, or organizations, which creates gendered career paths. And even on our last panel, I thought it was really cool, but also I heard a few people say, I like to work solo, or I don't want to get too big. And is that a choice, or is that a socialization on what people pick for what they want out of their careers? There's a theory called person environment fit theory, and that holds that people choose work environments and jobs that are congruent with their interests, values, and goals in order to achieve better life fit between what we individually want and what the work environment offers. And so individual factors will look at what's making people opt out of corporate life today because something's not fitting everyone's values as they go through the life course and begin to have a family or begin to want to have time for self or other values. Organization factors emphasize our male-oriented cultures and the fact that we don't have as many mentors, or people today are saying women don't need mentors, but they also really need sponsors at higher level that will promote women. And in addition, the lack of role models persists. So if you look at these together, we have to sort of do something to change the environment to make it more attractive to women to want to work for major companies, which is where uh, you make more money and you advance more in your career, or the Silicon Valley, or some of the higher paying jobs where the US economy is now coming back. In terms of the gender discrimination perspective, that's the next perspective. The argument there, and we've all heard these terms bandied around, even in political campaigns, about inequality is due to explicit and implicit gender bias that excludes women from career opportunities. Heard in the last panel on financing. And this is based on the idea of social role theory, which was also alluded to at the end of the last panel when we were told to think about how we're raising our sons and daughters. And it's really that we expect in society men and women to behave in a different way, and this carries over into organization life and how you're supposed to act. And so we expect women to be more nurturing, hold communal roles, focus on relationship, and yet, I always said, oh, I want to bring cookies to the meeting. Well, that would be very bad, right? If women are the only ones doing that. And men are traditionally seen and trained to be more assertive, dominant, and competitive and achievement oriented. And yet, as we were talking about the entrepreneurship panel, why is lifestyle and business, why are those at odds? And I look at that as communal and agentic going together. So the research on individual factors focuses on gender differences and self-assessments. We talked about the imposter syndrome and the likelihood that you will be stereotyped as you're trying to advance in your career. Organization factors look at these prevailing biases in the workplace. And there's one statistic that I wanted to pull to you from a study. What I thought was really interesting was that women on average get higher performance appraisals in most corporations. This is a large study, but there's still a 14 to 1 pay gap if you look at what men and women are paid. So it's like add a girl, but we're not going to pay you, right? And another woman,
They don't get specific feedback,
yeah,
so that's probably why they're better.
and the mentoring studies also say when they do get feedback, it's different. So like women might get feedback on how to manage a family and career, and guys might get feedback on how to avoid politics or networking. So I think there's like something going on here. Also, one of my co-authors was from China, and she talked about this study that where they follow Chinese high potential students from throughout their careers from college and onward. And there was this one study of these individuals where they took like our version of the SATs, and the Chinese women, they did much better on the pretest than the real test, and they're all equal, like high potential. These are elite of China, and I thought that was really interesting. Why would women perform better on the pretest than the actual test? You know, something's happening in the organization climate, and some backlash as well is occurring. And just as access to resources is the other thing we would look at in the climate at the organization. So what I would like us to do is to really try and think about how do we change the organization to not only get rid of the bad things about climate, but some in the paper I talk about how do you it's not enough to just prevent bias from happening, but we have to move the needle more to value what women bring to the table. The last thing we want to talk about is the work-family perspective. And individual factors there would focus on the fact that men and women's experiences are qualitatively different and how they experience organization life and work. And so we have the rise of women in the labor market, and yet we still have organizations that are designed to facilitate separation. This draws on work-family conflict theory, that the idea that working all in is still incompatible with time, energy, and behaviors needed to succeed. And studies show, though, that men now are reporting as high work-family conflict as women, but for whatever reason, we're still seeing women exit organizations. And I've talked to many companies where about 5 to 7 years in, even though they've hired at similar levels, women are leaving at the scientific and financial roles. So in interest of time, I will just talk about organization factors that I think are really making it difficult, but we still have a culture of FaceTime, overwork culture where time at work and working long hours is seen as commitment to the job, and this idea of unsupportive cultures. So before turning it over to Jamie, if we are going to move the needle on women's career equality, and if you are in a position of power at your firms or think about why you left companies where you worked, I would like us to have metrics that would focus on indicators of career quality and changes that would efforts that would integrate individual and organizational factors. So let's look at how much do women have not only equal access to career opportunities as men, but let's also measure participation and longevity. And then some of the things about the objective versus subjective success. Let's have reports of equal well-being from work and non-work outcomes and the likelihood of getting married, starting a family, and that pay and promotion. And without further ado, Jamie's going to talk a lot about the motherhood and fatherhood issues related to this.
Because it's hard to follow Ellen because she's literally my academic hero. So following on the last perspective around work family, a lot of my research focuses on kind of the micro level, individual factors. How does the individual feel? What are some factors that we go through as women, especially women as we enter leadership roles? Oftentimes we're already in the process of starting a family, so we have to blend that work and family and think about how it's going to impact our progression in an organization. So I look at how do I feel about this? What is it about how I feel that might be impacting or impeding my own ability to progress in an organization. And so I'm doing some new research that I thought I'd talk about a little bit. And actually, your question earlier is going to speak to the idea of this I call perceptual dichotomy, that we have this feeling that we have to be ideal workers, but that doesn't really go with being an ideal parent. And so we're constantly actually getting a lot of mixed messages from societal expectations. We need to be good. We need to be good mothers, but we also need to be good workers now too. And being a good worker means 100% commitment to an organization. And if you're 100% committed to an organization, then you probably can't be committed to anything else. So we have these sort of thoughts in our head of, yes, I want to be career oriented. I want to move up, move up the ladder, but how am I going to be perceived in that respect? And what about my other role? Because I want to be an ideal parent too. So it's becoming increasingly difficult. And the last panel talked about gender and stereotypes and things like that. So being a mother is a very sticky identity. It's something that's hard to let go. And when you're a working mother, the mother piece is hard to separate out of that. And so we have these perceptions of women. And so some of the research that I'm doing is looking at there's a way that I see myself, right? Who am I? That's my identity. But how much of who I am is a reflection of how I think others see me? And is this a dual relationship where they influence each other? So the idea that does identity start with our identity as a working mother, and we call this work family image, very much is shaped by our organizations and societal expectations, and not so much from who we are. So what ends up happening is our views and our images of ourselves and our identity become shaped by these expectations that others impose upon us. And I saw some research, and they use this term cognitive acrobats, and I thought that was a really good way to think about how working mothers think about themselves. You have to kind of be all things to all people, depending on the audience you're talking to. In this audience, well, I don't know who I should be in this audience because, you're all career women, and maybe I can be both. But I might go home or go pick up my kids later on today, and I have to take off my work clothes and sort of give this perception that I'm a serious mother. But then I got to go to my office and show that I'm a serious professor and about my career. So it's this dichotomy that we experience. And so here's The Bad Mothers, one of my favorite movies. Thank God for that movie. But it really reflects the stigma that we face as working mothers. And this was alluded to in the earlier panel, but it's sort of this damned if you do, damned if you don't. And there's stigma if you focus on work, right? So there's all this research that talks about working mothers are seen as not warm, but they're competent. And if you focus on family, so for example, if you engage in if you take on a flexible work arrangement or a reduced workload, you're going to get stigmatized for not being serious. You're too focused on family and not serious about work. And Kim and I are actually working on a new study where we're talking about, well, what's the impact at work if women don't feel good about the fact that they can't focus on family, which is kind of different because oftentimes if we're looking at factors that influence the workplace, we're looking at workplace, right? Well, how about looking at the fact that I feel like a shitty mom, okay? I slept at the Colonnade last night. Sorry, kids, but it was easy and convenient, and my babysitter was home, but that makes me feel like crap, but I did it because I wanted to be here and I wanted to, kick ass today. And but we actually found that not feeling good about yourself as a mother is a strong predictor of work-family conflict. So we know that there's tons of things that predict work-family conflict, right? Workplace factors, having a boss that is not supportive and all these other things. But it also is a function of not feeling confident in yourself in your non-work roles. And obviously, moving up the ladder and moving into leadership positions is going to be even, more so. You're going to lack that confidence, especially around being a mother. So, and it also leads to retention issues too. Women are more likely to feel like they're going to quit. So I'll just quickly talk about this, and then we can open it up to the panel. Some thoughts, a little bit about what I think we need to do about it, on a lot of the things that Ellen said. It's support for working mothers. We all know this. Policies are not enough. Work-family policies are great to some extent. Nobody uses them half the time because they're worried about the stigma. So we need to think about support beyond that. Actually, there's people in the room like Ken Matos who, I don't know, Ken, where are you? Are you here still? He stepped out. Okay, so, but he works for an organization called Life Meets Work, consulting and coaching to women that are high potential women, going into leadership roles, who are already in leadership roles, as they become mothers, and provide support for them in terms of how they're going to balance, how they're thinking about balancing work and family needs. So that is sort of above and beyond anything that policies can provide. Hopefully, we can get more leaders leading by example. And it doesn't have to be women leaders. I think it's even better when the men lead by example. And by the way, for the men, sharing the stigma, why should women share it? Men want flexibility too. And more recently, a study that I'm working on with a couple people in the room here about millennials, that millennials actually see their career and life as one and the same. So hopefully millennials, and I see a lot of them in the room, or you just look young and great, hopefully they're going to be the drivers of this, So let's get men, let's get millennials. Forget what working mothers need, it's what we all need. So with that, we have an amazing panel, and I'll let you do the introductions there.
All right. Well, first I'm going to ask you a couple questions,
Okay.
Ellen and Jamie. So Ellen, I wanted to talk a little bit more about career choice, which you touched on. And in your research, I believe you found that women are overrepresented in HR and administrative services, where they're less likely to advance. And women like to work with people and help others, attributes that are less common in high-powered jobs. So my question is, if this is women's natural preference, or is it, how do we ever achieve equality if they're not if they don't want these jobs that are naturally more powerful and high-paying?
Well, I think it starts early on. So while I'm not 100% thinking STEM is the only way to go, I think if women aren't, doing science and math and sticking with it from the early grades, it's going to be harder to become, a CFO, right? So I do think we have to have that occur earlier. And same with boys. What's happening is a lot of the jobs now in caring for elders are opening up, and men don't want, some will go into that job, but then the pay starts going down. So to solve it, I guess early on, try and change things, and then companies really try to have gender proportional representation across the whole organization. And I think there is a way to do that through having lateral career paths where people move back and forth.
So we can still have jobs where we like to work with people and help people, and we should be able to advance.
And every job today really needs more of these quote unquote relational attributes. We all like doctors better, right, that talk to us for a little bit. So I think we've also sort of rigidified roles for the hard jobs and the relational jobs. And my dean, who I love, who's an economist, told me, Ellen, I really value that you understand human resource management and OB. That's half my job as the CEO. So I think we really have to look at the jobs that are changing today to need both what I would call relational or more gendered skills and agentic skills.
Okay. Jamie, I wanted to talk more about your ideal mom, ideal worker dichotomy. And so I wonder, just from my own personal experience, so is this why now I leave work every day at 5:15 to go pick up my daughter from daycare? It's a really new phenomenon. But when I get home, I obsessively check my email and respond, and I feel like I have to be there for people if, in case something happens. And so am I doing this not because I want to, but because I want to appear like an ideal worker? I mean, maybe that's an obvious question, but I mean.
Well, I don't know if that's a gender thing. I think it's just the whole feeling that in the workplace today we're so multi-phrenic. It's just we have this technology at our hands and we're feeling like we always have to work all the time. It's funny because I've noticed that my kids are starting to really hold me accountable. The older they get, Mom, stop doing work. Come play a game with me, and it thank God for them, because it's the guilt that they're imposing on me that, as opposed to my own guilt. But I don't think that it's a gendered thing. I think that, but I do think it's just part of the way we think about work, and I think it's a cultural thing in this country, probably more so than in other cultures where it's that. That American work ethic, right? That we live to work, and we can't have a life outside of that. And again, the technology, I think, drives that to a large extent. By the way, another point I was going to make, but actually, Ellen gave a talk on Wednesday, and some of it is how we think about the strategies that we use to think about our work and family demands. So some people are integrators, right? They just can't help but not integrate work and family all the time, which is probably why you're more likely to check your emails at work and things like that. Some people are segment really well, and so they'll wait maybe until the kids go to bed, or there'll be certain chunks of time. And Ellen actually mentioned in some of the work she's done that there are volleyers
Volleyers or cyclers. So you have
volleyers or
peaks and valleys.
cyclers who go back and forth. And so I think a little bit is that preference around how you think about and separate or integrate your work and family roles.
And I just want to say I've been doing workshops and worked with Center for Creative Leadership to give people an assessment to think about how to gain more boundary control. And so there are strategies you can do, like not have your work email and personal email this getting back and forth, which politicians have learned is a bad thing to do, right?
So, Jamie, one more thing about the bad mother syndrome. You said that people less bound to their jobs and if they feel like a bad mom, they're maybe more likely to quit their job. So companies who want to retain female workers would do well to try and help mothers feel better about being a mom. So how does a company do that? How do you make a female worker feel better about being a mom?
Well, I don't know, because it's, I thought you were going to ask about the dads, if dads might feel that way too. I think we internalize things a lot more. So I don't think any organization can help us let go of that internalization of always feeling like we're never getting it all done and that we're, that we're better, and the whole imposter syndrome and things like that. But I do think these programs that companies are starting to offer, again, that go beyond policies, that really help women to coach and think about, what these experiences look like. It certainly helps to have good role models too in the organization, and see people that maybe learn from other mothers that know how to shut things off a little bit better, or are able to balance things. Although oftentimes the role models are not good role models, so that's that can often be a challenge. But I still think, and again, this whole idea of sharing in the stigma, if we get more people engaging in flex time, that not just the mothers, more millennials, more men, more people at the top, then we share that. Well, everybody shares the same problem, and maybe it becomes less of a problem. It becomes more of a norm than it does the exception.
Great. Okay. Well, so now let's move on to the rest of our panel. So if you guys each want to introduce yourself, to talk a little bit about what you do. I think some of you have some research also, and then how your experience relates to some of this that we've just been talking about. That'd be great. So, Marla?
Okay. Do you want us to do all of that at the same time, or do you want us to just introduce ourselves?
Introduce yourself and then kind of respond to the discussion here of the research.
Hi, I'm Marla Capozzi. I'm a consultant at McKinsey and Company. I'm actually coming up on 17 years as a consultant, believe it or not. And I did not enter out of middle school either. So there were other experiences along the way. So I do most of my work in innovation, growth and innovation, with our clients in particular. I'm also a mother of a 12-year-old daughter. And I am a vice chair at the board at Babson College with my lovely friend Jane over there, who I just saw in the audience. And I do some adjunct teaching. And McKinsey has put out some interesting research. It's available online about the Women in the Workplace 2016. And I think a lot of those elements are certainly true. I guess I would probably maybe respond in a couple ways. It was interesting. I was teaching in a 3-day McKinsey program, and there were several women, obviously the minority in the group, and we had an interesting lean-in conversation about what the impact of the lean-in book has had. And while it certainly increased the volume of conversations about the topic, it also really did put the onus on women. As you have to lean in, and you need to lean in more, and you need to do all of those things, coming from a woman who had her infrastructure in place and her support network in place from the very beginning, and also came from a prestigious university. And that isn't the case for everybody. And so we had a huge discussion about what are the implications of some of that here. And I think the reality is we also place, I think there's social stigma, of course, as you guys certainly mentioned, but I think we also maybe tend to be our own worst enemies, because we hear these rules: women can't do this, women should be doing this, women should be doing that. And instead of pushing back on them, we tend to internalize them and make ourselves feel guilty about them. And especially on the performance front, we recently did a survey with our clients, and we asked our clients to rate our consultants, and we asked our consultants to rate ourselves. And not surprisingly, clients rated women higher than women rated themselves, and clients rated men lower than men rated themselves. Not surprisingly at all. and from that standpoint, especially when you get into client service type jobs where the connectivity, the relationships, I mean, that's, my job. I help people. If I don't enjoy helping other people be successful, I need to find another career, because consulting is not the path for you if that's not something that you enjoy, and you do it without being in the limelight. So you have to be able to do it, let that person be successful, and step back and say, I contributed to that, but I'm not getting any credit for it. And so for me, a lot of it too is about choice in terms of being accepting of each other's choices. There are going to be women that end up in HR and admin, and it's by choice. And many of them are very happy in those roles, and we shouldn't pass judgment on it. The people that we need to help are the ones that aren't happy or aren't getting the opportunities that they want to be successful or want to be in senior positions and don't get that opportunity. And I guess maybe the last thing I'll say, we can open it up and continue along, is there are so many unconscious biases. And there's been a lot of research published on this. And it's just amazing because it exists within us. And that's the fascinating research. We've been doing it internally at McKinsey on ourselves. And we find that women have unconscious biases about women because of society. Maybe I grew up in, an Italian, second generation Italian family. So the things that I have done have been like chaos as far as my family is concerned because of those rules that are put on us. And so we find that it's not just men, that women have it about women. And some of these unconscious biases, when you bring those to the surface, you think to yourself, well, why am I doing that? Maybe I don't need to be actually doing, those types of things. So I often describe, I have like multiple jobs, and they ebb and flow. And I think of my life like as a heat map, because I am, I also hate the term working mother, because I'm a mother who works. I'm a person that has a portfolio of things in my life. And my life includes my family, my daughter, my career at McKinsey, my work at Babson, which is incredibly important to me, and other things. And, they're not even, right? And you have to, once I just got out of the mindset of, you have to be doing everything at the same level and the same, pace and as good at exactly the same time, then I just completely released the constraints on myself. Because this week, I've been gone for 3 days teaching. It was hugely intense, but it was my McKinsey priority. My weekend is going to be my daughter's priority. Then there's going to be ebbs and flows of each of these things. But to imagine my life without all of them would be awful, because that's what brings the richness to everything that I get to do. And so that was just a huge reframing in my mind of, you can't have everything at the exact same time is really true, but you can have everything as long as you're willing to let yourself ebb and flow throughout the everything, and not put that type of, I have to be the perfect mother or I have to be the perfect employee all the time, because nobody else is doing, men aren't doing that. I mean, seriously, they're not doing that at all, right? And also there's this feeling like, I can't miss my daughter plays ice hockey. I can't miss a hockey game. I have to be there at every hockey game. And then when you actually realize that that's you, because the message to her, in my opinion, of me being at every hockey game is that she's the center of the universe. She ain't the center of the universe. Not to me, not to anybody. And that's the wrong message. And then she knows I have other things to do, but she knows that she's my main priority in life, but I have other things to do, right? And so you start to reframe some of these things in your mind, and I'm just like, yeah, and people will say to her, "Oh, is your mom come to our game?" She's like, "No, she's too busy. She got other things to do," which is totally fine. It's totally fine to me, right? So I'll pass it on.
Hi, everyone. My name's Ann Tikkanen, and I work at the YMCA of Greater Boston. Brief introduction about the organization. We operate out of 85 community centers and branches in and around the Greater Boston area and Boston. I hope a number of you are members. Thank you for your membership. If you're interested in learning more about the Y, please do reach out to your neighborhood Y. We offer child development support, health and wellness. We have many current modern programs that are addressing social, economic, and health disparities in and around the Greater Boston area. Katie, before I forget, too, I wanted to mention what a great article recently in terms of your emphasis and shining the light on, particularly, as I read it, single mothers raising children, the economic inequalities and difficulties in raising children. Can you imagine in the city of Boston, $50,000 a year doesn't do it. So thanks for writing that article. What a great article. Really right up the alley for an organization like the Y where I'm at. I've been there just in October, 20 years. How did that happen? And prior to that, had worked exclusively for technology companies. And so I made a very deliberate, in the Y world, would call that parachuting in. And there's been no looking back from my view. And I've really been able to actually use a lot of my entrepreneurial skills as well that I garnered both as a co-op student at Northeastern undergraduate school and at Babson, where I got my MBA.
Yay!
So,
Undergrad alum.
you know, the
Super yay.
the idea that at the YMCA, so YMCA, right, we serve more women now than we do men. The same is true for our membership. The same is true of our staff. We have a very large part-time staff. As you can imagine, most of our facilities are open 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. We do AM care, afternoon care, evening care. We serve 500,000 meals each year, including breakfast, lunch, and dinner, particularly for those families that don't have food. And so it's an amazing, organization, completely dedicated in the truest of nonprofit terms as a charity organization to support families in all of the communities in which we operate. I think the thing that probably resonates most when I think about, for me, thinking about my growth and education. I also have two daughters. They're age 26 and 28 now. I vowed early on to love all ages, all aspects of their development. Somehow I managed to convince my husband to come along on that journey too. And so it's really, I went to the DC Women's March. I love the poster, a strong woman raised by a strong woman. Isn't that amazing? And yet we talked earlier too about the emotional support, that how important that is. I can't imagine not having that. My mother was the youngest of 4 girls, and she lost her mother when she was 9. The rest of her life was looking up after that, really. And so, education and a professional aspect of who I am is definitely a reflection of that support that I received. And thinking about, again, challenges in particular for women, I think that some of the soft skills are really, really most needed to be understood in a very robust way. A few of my Y colleagues are in the room here today as well, and we support the Women's Leadership Resource Network. As an organization, we're lucky enough to have employee-led organizations such as this one. And there is not a day that goes by that I don't get an email or some type of a message where somebody wants to address how can they be a better communicator, the soft skills that I think are really, really needed, for women to own them include, and some of them you might think are inherently more appropriate for women than men, and yet you've got to be adaptable, you've got to be a problem solver. I think you've got to be a critical observer. I've been frequently told, as you can imagine, as a CFO, and my portfolio does include HR. I oversee also a workforce development group that we operate called Training Inc., which is helping the underemployed and unemployed, particularly women, particularly single mothers with children. But I've been told in the past that I'm too blunt, and that's one of my favorites. That was just yesterday. But so here's the thing. Really digging in on some of those soft skills that also complement some of the technical skills. When we listen to the entrepreneurs, when we listen to the world of McKinsey and the robust organization that global, concerns that are being addressed, I also think in general that women this will come as no surprise to all of you as CFO. Women's financial acumen has just got to be better. It's got to be improved. The leveraging your knowledge around the language of business. It doesn't mean you're a finance person. You can own the language of business in terms of understanding what it means to raise capital, to what it takes to drive the growth of the business. And this is true especially for the nonprofit world now, because we are so resource constrained. We'll never have enough money. So, that's the thing in terms of really understanding what you're going to do with those resources and being able to articulate it, communicate it well in terms of the language of business. So thanks for having me here today. It's really great, Jamie. Thank you.
So I just have to say one thing to Anne's comment about you being direct or aggressive or whenever blunt. I've been called direct and many other more inappropriate things. And the next time, and I started, when somebody says that to me now, I look at them and I say, thank you. And it just immediately changes the dynamic in the conversation. So try it sometime when somebody says something that is sexist in that kind of way. Sorry for the language, but just I view it as a compliment. I actually try to be direct, and so I said thank you. And all of a sudden, the whole dynamic changes. So it just reminded me of when she said that.
I just have to say, one of my first jobs, I worked in industry before becoming a professor. My boss wanted me to get a perm. And so, and so when you're young and low power, you have to figure out what to say to that too. But so appearance, we haven't even talked about appearance today. So look forward to you.
Did you tell him to get one too?
Only a few dozen.
My name's Cyrus. I'm Associate General Counsel at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts. I graduated from the Northeastern University School of Law in 2002. I've been told I'm honest, blunt, direct since I was a kid. I remember in college standing around a mirror with a bunch of friends. Someone was trying on an outfit and someone turned to me and said, "Ask Io, she'll tell you. She'll let you know exactly whether this looks good or not." And that was the first time I was like, what? So yeah, if you want direct opinions, I guess you can come to any one of us. So
Change the name of the panel to the Blunt Girls.
Exactly. Next time around, right? Change it.
So I'll talk a little bit about Blue Cross because Blue Cross is a company I'm blessed to be at in terms of its female leadership right now. I'm also the president of our Women's Employee Resource Group, so I can talk a little bit about that. But I want to start in talking about my own career path, kind of who I am as a person and how that has informed what I bring to the workplace and what I've been thinking about over the last few years in terms of my career. Some things I wish, some messages, or as I say, I never got the memo. I wish I got the memo a little earlier about, for instance, the soft skills. So to take you back, first of all, I grew up in the woods of Maine with no running water. And that is, among other things, no health insurance, tiny little 4-room schoolhouse, 2 grades in a room, no cafeteria, no gym. That's something I never, ever talk about. And there are other aspects of my family and my upbringing that I just don't talk about. I also happen to be gay, and that's something that I didn't talk about in the workplace for a long time. I just got the message somewhere along the way, especially when I started working at a big firm. And this is not a direct message that anyone gave me, but I brought it, that I was supposed to bring this professional, competent, serious persona as a young woman in corporate America, and that to succeed, I just really had to project that image. And part of it is my personality. I just kind of people have told me maybe not easy to access. But now that I'm at Blue Cross, and today, I've been there 12 years. When I started, I don't think there were any women in the C-suite, as we call it. Today, our chief operating officer is a woman. Our chief underwriter is a woman. Our chief financial officer is a woman. Our chief HR person is a woman. Our head of IT is a woman. A couple of these women happen to be African American. The chief medical officer is a male, but other than that, it's a very female-oriented company. Now, part of that is being in healthcare. As someone shared a slide, healthcare tends to be 78% women. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts is about 70% women. But as I said, I started there 12 years ago, and it was not necessarily the case. So I think one of the questions for today might be, well, how does a company get there? And and also how do those leaders get there? And in terms of how does a company get there, I have to say, I think it starts at the top. And I know that that's not maybe the most inspiring message for those of us who aren't at the top and are wondering how we can affect change. But the fact of the matter is the CEO has just very clearly on a consistent basis made it clear that diversity matters, that it matters at this company, that we're going to be advocates for diversity in terms of our role in the Commonwealth. And then, of course, in selecting, his left hand and right hand people, he's both selected the best of the best. They happen to be women, and the chief financial officer actually was a promotion from within. So that's just unheard of, to have a female CFO, and then also to have a promotion from within. So I do feel blessed and honored to be there. I'm also a mother. So I'm a lawyer later in life. I graduated from law school at 33. I'm a mother later in life. I have a 6 and 8-year-old. I had kids at 40. And I remember distinctly when I had kids, I was 2 or 3 years into my career at Blue Cross. And again, I did this thing where I felt like that's something, that's messy. I can't let anybody know that, I don't know, that I'm coming, been up all night, or that, that there are tough things happening at home. I have to just show up at work and be professional and always be polite and kind. And I think what happened over time is people within my department, other lawyers, frankly, just started feeling like I just wasn't that accessible. Or maybe they noticed sometimes that directness came across as slightly abrasive, and nobody knew that actually I was going through a really, really hard time in my personal life. And I think it actually would have behooved me to, in an appropriate, thoughtful manner, have told 1 or 2 people kind of what was going on. I think people would have assumed the best instead of not understanding why I seemed a little checked out sometimes. So having said all that, I feel like I've had a very successful career at Blue Cross, and I feel like I'm overcoming that. But one thing I'm learning, so I said I'm the president of our employee resource group, and this is Women's History Month. So we're having some of those executive leaders that I spoke of speak at some upcoming panel discussions. And I was thinking about what makes these women so successful. And I've asked them, too, about their own kind of career trajectories. And I have to tell you, first of all, yes, they're the smartest of the smart, the hardest working, and incredibly competent. But they also have this great sense of humor and warmth, frankly, that they bring to many interactions, even if it's just to kick off a meeting or in the hallway. There are just these chit-chatty conversations that people have that I sometimes forget to have because I just want to be direct. I just want to be efficient. I'm an attorney. I used to bill in 6-minute increments. You just get the job done. And they're also their authentic selves, right? There's this thing about authentic leadership. And like I said, 2 of them are gay, and that's just part of who they are. And it's whatever it is that they bring to the table, it makes people trust them. It makes people want and feel inspired by them. And so I don't know if other people feel the way that I used to about having to kind of compartmentalize my life, but I think it's okay, obviously, in a professional way, to be really, truly be yourself. And sometimes women are a little hesitant to, I don't want to reinforce stereotypes as we were saying, but a little hesitant to speak up in meetings. I know I was when I first started at Blue Cross. It's like this whole other language that they have with all these acronyms and whatnot. But it's okay to just speak up and then help each other, right? So if someone speaks up and then someone else says the same thing and everyone turns to Joe and says, "Oh, what a great idea," remember to help your sister and maybe recognize or say what a great idea and watch each other's back. Someone said to me the other day when I said, how do you think women succeed at Blue Cross? And she said, it's not the men that I feel ever at Blue Cross or in general in my career have stood in my way. I feel sometimes like it's other women. And again, I don't want to make that a stereotype, but that is what someone said, and I've experienced that myself. I feel like I got thrown under the bus by a peer in my department. I'm like, why didn't she come to me with that issue? Why did she go to my boss? And it's just, let's think a little differently about how to help one another. And I feel like I wanted to say some other things, but I think I'll just leave it there.
All right. Well, I know we're running a little short of time, but I wanted to just throw out one question before we open it up to the audience, because you guys talked a lot about soft skills, and you talked about warmth and authenticity. And I've been reading a lot about empathy being seen as a quality for leaders that maybe hasn't been recognized as much before, but it is being more valued now. And I think that's a quality, maybe I'm stereotyping, but I think women are known for being empathetic, maybe more than men. So I'm just wondering what you guys think about that. Is that something that will help women, this renewed focus on empathy? I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
I do, and it's actually kind of ties into this other piece I was going to say. Is like, how do you make a workforce, a workplace more conducive to women and women's advancement? And so the first 6 or so years in my department, the leader of the department was a woman, but there would be no flex time. And we were mostly women in the department, mostly women lawyers, mostly having kids, no flex time, no part-time. And I think from what I understand, her perspective was, I don't want people to think the law department has these special loosey-goosey rules. And sure enough, the whole company has moved more towards e-working. But now everyone in the department can work from home 1 day a week. Some people in a certain area, I guess, can work from home 2 days a week. And you're right, that empathy piece, it's just, first of all, it's not questioned, but second of all, even my boss, the snow days, my boss was like, oh yeah, don't worry about it. Everybody had to work from home that day. Or I'll say, oh, my son was sick yesterday. Oh, I know, Jennifer's daughter's been sick for 2 days. It's awful. How is everybody? I think that's huge. And I know that's not tying into the kind of the larger issue you were talking about, but I really think even just those little policy changes, make me want to work harder. And like you said, if I'm working from home on a Tuesday, you can bet I am so responsive, so on top of it, right? Because on the one hand, I don't want everyone to think I'm taking a nap or taking my kids out to lunch or something. But on the other hand, I really appreciate it and I want to keep it, and I'm more productive. I don't have to get dressed up in the morning. I can just, roll with it.
I actually think, all great leaders have some degree of empathy. It might come more natural to some women, and to be honest, it might come less natural to some women as well, depending on this level of authenticity, which I think is really important. Peter Grauer, who's the chairman of Bloomberg, who's been chairman of Bloomberg and also an amazing leader in general, spoke this week, and he talked about the characteristics of humility, in terms of empathy, humility, and also this idea of having a statement for yourself on what inspirational leadership means to you, both in terms of how you want to be a leader. And that doesn't matter if you're junior, if you're in school running a team, if you're leading a law department, if you're whatever. There's leadership everywhere you go. And I just thought it was an amazing look and how much of a focus everything he does is on people. And this is coming from a man. And I took away from that role model so many things for myself that I could improve on, but also not copy. So I just think there's something really in what Io's saying around this authenticity. I tried for a while at McKinsey to be like everybody else. I was never more miserable in my life until I woke up one day and I said, I can't live like this. I can't try to be like these other people. I need to be myself. And if that means they ask me to leave, then they ask me to leave. But I can't do it anymore. It was so exhausting. As you can probably remember in the early parts, it's exhausting to hide things and do this and do that. And finally, just releasing that, you're like, okay, I just have to be myself. I have to be true to myself, because if we're not, then we're all twisted up in all these other things that these guys mentioned in terms of our confidence goes down, and then we worry and we're looking over our shoulder. You can't do your best work. You have to think about what's going to give you peak performance and what's going to make you the most inspirational leader as well. And if empathy is something that is natural to you and you really excel at, that's great. It's not going to be the same for everybody in this room. Definitely not.
I've been working for about over 10 years on a National Institute of Health, $30 million funded study to change the workplace to reduce work-life conflict to improve health. And we've designed a training intervention for supervisors on family and work-life supportive behaviors, because what we found is there's a perceptual gap where 100% of managers rate themselves as empathetic, but 1/3 to 50% of their subordinates do not. So basic things like saying hello in the morning, emotional support, instrumental support. And so we have people go through an hour of training. We do it all at a work group level. And it doesn't matter if your individual manager was changed, if you have at least 50% of the people trained in a randomized control trial, we find that stress and depression go down in the workforce. So I do think not everybody knows empathy. We have
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so do we want to open it up for audience questions now?
Short question for Professor. Is it Kossek?
Kossek.
Kossek. When you were talking about the studies you've done around being a segmented worker versus an integrated worker, someone who's more comfortable checking their email throughout the day or more comfortable setting it aside, were there findings that suggested that one method is better, makes you a better worker, happier, more successful, or was it more finding what works for you and then, doing that?
So that's a great question. And they're happy integrators and they're unhappy integrators. They're happy separators and unhappy. And our moderator talking now about having to leave work at 5:15, you might have to learn how to change your style over the life course to fit on the new identities you take on. And you also have to look at your family or partner or your work group. So so I've done training with both individuals and teams. So the number one thing is to have alignment with your values. If you want to be on vacation and not checking email or in the weekend and you're miserable, something you can teach people to set a little more boundaries. You do have to let other people know you're working that way. And if this is an emergency, call me, but I'm not checking email till Monday morning. So you can have work groups do experiments. And also in your home, we just had a paper accepted to a good journal called Academy Management Journal, a colleague of mine named Kelly Wilson and it's called Misery Loves Company. And what we found is it's not just one way is best or another. It's like if you're living with a workaholic, and you both are workaholics, you could have a really good couple relationship. So I think part is what you want. If you're not happy, there are things you can do like, turning off your cell phone at night. I've done training for supervisors, just having them leave their cell phone out of the bedroom at night. Simple things for physical, mental boundaries.
So I'm a survivor. I am a working mom. I've been a working mom for over 20 years. So each of my kids, I was home for 3 months and I was very happy to go back to work. So I'm probably a bad mom, but I told them not living with me was going to end up in therapy. They might as well get their money's worth. So let's have fun while we do it. My question though is, as my kids grew up and are now nearly fully formed adults, and I think about support for working mothers, I would prefer we talk about support for working women, as I have aging parents and I have kids who are in life stages that require time and attention that a daycare provider and a summer camp can't fix. Absolutely. And I think those issues are only going to get more and more of our attention as we baby boomers, tail end, thank you, are getting tired of getting up and going to work every day. So what is your research telling us about what's coming? And please don't scare me, Jamie.
I probably shouldn't say this because it's on video, but I remember when I first came here, they didn't want junior faculty to do service, but they asked me to be on an ad hoc committee to improve work-life balance for faculty. So how could I not do that? I mean, come on. I wanted to create an environment for myself that I was selfish. And I wanted to obviously share that with everybody else. And it was interesting because we worked really hard to create this universal policy for everybody. And I already had my kids, so I knew that there were things on the horizon, but I was thinking about people at different life stages. I was thinking about men. I was thinking about people who have, some of my colleagues who have aging, not just aging parents, but they're aging, and they have spouses who had health issues. And so we really worked hard to create this universal policy. And then, it was overwhelmingly accepted. We created a modified duties so that for faculty you could, and then when it got implemented, the announcement went out and it said, here's a policy for new moms. And I'm like, what is going on? Oh. And it's so hard. I think it just speaks to it's so hard to let go of the, and I think Nadia, are you still
Bias.
here? Yeah, you mentioned this in an email. You know, it's just not a mom's issue, but yet we can't. That's why I said it's a
Can't let it
sticky
go.
identity.
Yeah,
It
can't let it
doesn't.
go.
It's just so we have to. That's why I mean, the more men, the more I know. There's only 3 in the room, but thank God there's at least 3. But we all know men, and we work for men. The more that millennials push the envelope on some of these things, or in the baby boomers say, "Hey, I need support too," or else it's just never going to happen because that stickiness just doesn't go away unless we force it to. So it's like changing the norm, or making it a norm, or not. Yeah.
Yeah, or not.
All right, so we probably have time for just 1 or 2 questions. I saw a hand back here. And then after this, we'll take a little bit of a shorter break, so we'll stay on track.
Hi. My question to the panelists is, so you talked about soft skills and separators and integrators. What are your thoughts on communicator identity for men versus women? I'll give you a small example. Back in my work, when I was working, I think there was a term used, a corporate dropout, in the process of starting my own business. I noticed that women were over communicating and they were taken or labeled as seeking permission, and men would just go off and do their own things and considered as taking initiative. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, just if you're interested, I have an article that's open source online called Work-Life Boundaries in the Digital Age, Organizational Dynamics, and it has an assessment so you can see what you are. I think part of this is moving to results-oriented work, and I hate, there were consultants that made that phrase hot, but I do think I think people should move toward a culture where you share what you're comfortable with and just be aware that if you're the only sharer, there is going to be stigma. So what I like to see is groups talk about their preferred styles for availability, and more people are managing their own time, self-regulating when you want to meet, and emails go back and forth. And so I think it's almost a good way for teams as you start a project to talk about how we're going to work together and availability. And then you don't get into it's my daughter, my elder care, or I really need to run from 5 to 6 every day, and just move beyond it so it's not an issue. And everybody has something.
One of my clients who's a CEO in Dubai, believe it or not, of a family-owned enterprises, he got rid of all job descriptions in the organization, all of them, deleted them from the human resource database and said he doesn't want to see another one again. Mainly because he wanted to say, what is the role that you're doing? What is the outcome that you're doing? And the whole idea of that's not my job, that's so-and-so's job. No, it isn't. We're all here pulling the same weight, and you have a set of outcomes that you're delivering against. And to hear something like that from a CEO in the Middle East was outrageous, right? But I mean, those are the types of things that we don't challenge. And I even thought to myself, God, that never even occurred to me. Get rid of the job descriptions. And he said the cultural impact of it was like a tsunami. It was unbelievable. Like immediately people were freed from things. And so I just say it as a way to think about some of the orthodoxies and rules that we think you have to have this, you have to have a job description, whatever. I mean, what happens if they go away? I mean, I was completely surprised. Isn't it shocking, right?
Probably have time for one more question. Is there anyone? All right, great. So we're going to take a 10-minute break and we'll reconvene right at 11:30. Thank you.